Welcome. How are y'all doing today? Let me get just a very simple binary thumbs up, thumbs down on how we're feeling today. Some of y'all are lying, because I got no thumbs downs. Oh, we got some sideways thumbs. Oh, it's okay, I'm here. It's okay, we can be here. We bring whatever energy we bring into the room, and then we all hold it together. That's what this community is about. Welcome to Creative Mornings. How many of you have never been to one of our events before? Raise your hand. Well, hello. Hello, friends, new friends. It's not a cult. Moving on. Welcome. This is a morning breakfast lecture series that has been happening in this great city for the last 11, 12 years. It is a global movement, a global collective that was founded by a wonderful human being in New York City who was tired of having to pay thousands of dollars to gather with fellow creative service professionals and artists and hobbyists and lovers of art to be inspired. How many of you guys have ever tried to go to Adobe Max? It does cost thousands of dollars. So she decided to open up her studio in New York and invite some of her friends to come in and speak to her team at first. And it has now ballooned into this multi-city, global, tens of thousands of person thing that we get to participate alongside them with in. I'm gonna eventually get my words at some point today, so bear with me. Every month we gather around a theme, and this month's theme is reflection. The theme is selected by chapters all over the world previous year. So we currently know this year all the themes for next year, and they're all very exciting. The themes are meant to be interpreted pretty broadly. When you say the word reflection, a lot of things come to mind. Introspection, a literal reflection in a mirror or reflective surface. There are some counter words that come to mind as well that I will let our speaker talk about when she gets onto the stage. But the reason we keep this broad is because every community needs something different. What we need here in DC and what Sao Paulo needs in Brazil are not the same thing. So a single word theme leaves room for interpretation based on that community. All our speakers come from the audience in one capacity or another. They've been volunteers, they've been participants, they've been contributors. And all of this happens, not just here, but all over the world, based on volunteerism and goodwill. I don't get paid to do this. None of our core team members get paid to do this. And all of this happens because we have a lot of generous partners in DC who make it possible. Our title sponsor for this year is Bittersweet Creative. I'm biased, I work for them. Bittersweet Creative is a multi-service creative agency and storytelling team that believes fundamentally in practicing creativity from a posture of rejecting cynicism, defying apathy, and celebrating good. If you've been here before, you've heard this before. And I'm not sorry, because it's something I need to hear every day, because this world is very cynical. It's very easy to be apathetic because of the things that we see in the world. And sometimes we forget that there's good shit happening amongst all the bad shit happening. So we take the despair, and we don't ignore it, but we take it, and we do something beautiful with it. And I think that's what creativity is. That's what art is. How many of you guys do that on a daily basis, right? Take your despair, take the pain, channel it into something beautiful. Sweet. Love it. Like I said, we do a lot of work. One of the things we do, storytelling. If you know of an organization or an individual doing any beautiful hope-building sort of human resilience work anywhere around the world, go to this website and nominate that person or organization, and we will send a team of filmmakers and photographers and writers, some of whom are in the room right now. Steven, raise your hand. Steven's told like 3 or 4 bittersweet stories up until this point, beautifully, by the way. And we will send them out to go tell those stories. So if you know those people, please do. We've also got great sponsors in Plants Alive and Charlestown AV. Often, if we ever need ASL translation, you will see someone beautifully translating up here, and that is provided by Plants Alive because we like to pay our translators. And Charlestown AV, handsome gentleman in the back there with the camera. Everybody say hi. Prior to the pandemic, we used to record all of our talks and have them posted online. And after the pandemic, we couldn't do that anymore because it was expensive and we didn't have any money. And then Chris at Charlestown reached out and said, hey, we would love to do this for you for free. And I said, cool, great. And so super grateful for them to be here doing this with us. So I'm moving through this because our wonderful hosts here at the Rubel have asked that we have a very hard stop at 10 o'clock. The reason we have a very hard stop at 10 o'clock is because we want to let you loose into this beautiful brand new exhibit that they have in the building and let them also open the building to the public who wants this exhibit. This space is one of the most beautiful and engaging spaces in our city. It's new, it's beautiful. We've wanted to be here for a long time, and we didn't really know how to. And Claudia, over there by the door in the corner, made it all possible. Again, it's kind of remarkable. I say this all the time, but I have a lot of hosts reach out to me and be like, how do you guys get these great spaces? Because they're like trying to get high school gyms, and that's fine, high school gyms are great, but I'm like, I'm not doing a lot. We just have the great spaces, and I'm asking great people like Claudia, and they just say yes, and it's kind of a miracle every single time it happens, and it happens once a month. So please be grateful to them. That's why I'm kind of blowing through the spiel a little bit, because again, I want to respect that hard stop at 10 o'clock. Also, thank you all for being respectful of the art and all the things. I love how great you are. Also, it all gets executed by a team of people who greeted you at the door, who pours you coffee, who sometimes send you emails. Again, none of these people get paid. I've got to take Jack off because he left us for LA, so Jack is no longer on the team. I didn't like the way I phrased that, and we'll circle back to it later. I'm going to look over here for 5 seconds, and I'll turn back to y'all once I reset mentally. Okay. Everyone on the team is great. I love them. They are the reason why anything happens. You got to be honest about the type of leader you are, and I am a pretty, what's like the opposite of type A? I'm like a type Z leader, and I just love that I have so many different types of people on this team who get shit done on a daily basis. So I'm really grateful to this team. If you would like to be part of our core team with any fresh ideas, fresh insights, criticisms are welcome, or part of our day of volunteer team who again are greeting you, checking you in, pouring you coffee, please send an email to maridonovan@gmail.com, and he will make sure to get you plugged in where you need to be. This community only grows if you grow it. When I took the helm 3 years ago, I basically said I don't care how big we are, I just want us to be a community of fidelity and depth. I want us to show up for one another, even if it's just once a month. I want us to just show up once a month and show up well once a month. So please keep bringing friends. People who have been here for the first time, if you dig it, bring a friend. If you don't, shut up. No, please, if you don't, tell me. Tell me why you don't. I'm going to skip that because we got a hard stop at 10. I talked about this already. How many of y'all were with us last month at the Kennedy Center when we heard, where is she in the room? She was registered, but she's not in the room. Anyways, it's fine. It was a great conversation. It was a great meditation. It was a great time, and we loved being at the Kennedy Center. And I just like throwing up pictures of you wonderful, beautiful people. And now for the person you came to hear from, because let's be real, you didn't come to hear from me. Like I said, every month we have a theme. Every time we're sitting down trying to figure out what this theme, how to approach it, who to approach it. There are no shortage of people who can take a stage and say words and inspire. So our team always wants to make sure that the person that is being handed the mic is the right person. It's a hard thing to discern, and it's always a hard thing to discern. But sometimes it's a little bit easier, because sometimes there's just a person who's been in the community, in your life, as a friend, as a colleague, as someone who I'm personally inspired by on a regular basis, who just sort of makes sense for the theme. And this theme of reflection, Dr. May Curry was the person that came to mind almost immediately. One ask, one yes, and it worked out really well. Dr. Michelle May Curry is an author. She is a curator at DC Arts and for DC Arts and Humanity, the curator for DC Arts and Humanities. She is an educator, and she herself is an artist of multimedia forms, collage, photography. I would say outside of, yes, I say the word author, but some authors are also artists with their words, and I think Michelle is one of those people. She's also a great human being. I like to imagine that this stage will only ever have great human beings. One of my waking nightmares as a host the last 3 years is that we will platform somebody, and then 3 months later a tweet will emerge that they tweeted in 2014, and then I gotta walk that shit back. I literally think about this all the time. And I can confidently say that that's never been something I've been concerned about with people like Michelle, because I know them on a personal and professional level. I know her heart, I know her work, and there's really no one I would rather speak to us about the theme and concept of reflection than Michelle. Michelle, would you like to please come take the stage?
Can you put it back in though?
Oh, yes. Also, Michelle is like, she just got a cast off because she broke her wrist, so she's really doing the most for us here today.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for waking up this morning. Getting out of bed to commune together in this beautiful space feels extremely special to be here with you all, not only because we get to bask in the gloomy morning light coming in through the Rubel Museum's windows, but because for the past year, I've been sitting where you all are sitting, hungrily leaning in to hear from speakers that Obi is so beautifully curated. I love the form of these talks, and when done well, I think they can sit right at that intersection of an intimate and tender offering and provocative challenge to the listener, right? Like watching someone peel back the layers of themselves invites you all to do the same. What's been really fun in preparing for this morning is that I realized that I'm essentially doing an assignment that I gave my Georgetown students as their final presentation for the last 4 years, an intellectual autobiography, which is a form that asks the speaker to tie their personal life and experiences to their professional life and intellectual commitments. So thank you, Obi, for making me do my homework, and also for making me realize how equal parts fun and challenging this genre is, and for giving me a reason to invite my Georgetown students out for a field trip. Oh, hey. In preparing for this, it also struck me how quintessentially Creative Mornings this theme of reflection is, because by nature, every single theme is asking the speaker to reflect, right? It's a theme that sounds easy for a curator and a writer and photographer like myself to have fun with, since photography is an art form reliant on mirrors, and curation is an exercise grounded in thematic visual storytelling. But photography and curation also require synthesizing, a word that in its best definition implies a kind of neat and tidy gathering together, and in its worst form implies a kind of flattening of meaning for the sake of time and simplicity. I know we have to be out by 10 a.m. But I have to say, the first thing that came to mind for me when thinking about what I wanted to talk about today wasn't a global story reflecting on the state of documentary photography in an age of political extremism, in an age of genocide, where I see my work sitting within this moment. It wasn't either a talk about the work of art curation as a storytelling tool of power and gatekeeping that is often beholden more so to capitalism and clout than craft and vision. Though both of those would be very spicy and worthwhile talks in our nation's capital in the month before a world-defining election, actually, what I want to talk about today is a little quieter, a little more tender. It's a talk partially about what I learned about myself as a writer and as a creative while cleaning out my childhood bedroom this summer in preparation for my parents moving house after 40 years. Today is actually the day that they're handing over the keys to somebody else, so it's sort of sweet. It's a talk about reflection through refraction, about the distortion of our core stories always laying underneath, about archiving the many things that accumulate, and about assigning meaning and value to them so that these objects become talismans and heirlooms, and sometimes even art objects that endure beyond ourselves. It's primarily a talk about photography and family and home, a little bit about mine. I don't know if you all can you all see this? You can all see this? Okay. This is my paternal grandparents, Kitty Curry and William Curry. But mostly it's about the role of photography in archiving and family storytelling, something I've spent the best part of the last decade thinking about. I hope you'll bear with me as some of my more professorial tendencies come out, because I find that I can't give a talk these days without wanting to call out to you, the listener, and make you think alongside me. So and as someone who doesn't really like to talk about myself too much, I'm hoping that you'll share in the burden of reflecting alongside me, with the hope that we all come away feeling good. Now, before I show you a ridiculous panoramic picture of the bedroom of my girlhood, which is really about to happen, I want to start with some 101 definitions of reflection and refraction. Because what I want to suggest today is that there is rarely such a thing for us humans, and certainly for us photographers and storytellers, as pure reflection. It is all, in the end, refraction. If reflection is the act of light reflecting back when it hits a medium on a plane, refraction, on the other hand, is the process by which light shifts its path as it travels through a material, causing the light to bend. If reflection usually occurs in mirrors, refraction, in contrast, usually occurs in lenses. We are all, of course, lenses, not mirrors. We are all porous and imperfect filters. We are, as my best friend regularly likes to remind me, the stories we tell ourselves. I'd go as far to say that in those moments of deep connection with another, where someone feels like a mirror of ourselves, that we experience flashes of recognition not in some essential core self, but in a shared set of lenses, a shared way of making meaning of the world around us. We experience intimacy as shared stories. Objects, in turn, take on those stories. They become lenses that help us make sense of our relationship between ourselves and others. They are, like us, an important and accessible material that light travels through, turning reflections into refractions. Okay, so we all have the same definition? Feeling good? And this summer, I had the joy of becoming extremely aware of the foundational stories that my lenses for viewing the world are based on. I touched what felt like every single one of them with my bare hands, and I'd like for a moment to make you all do the same, okay? So if you could please close your eyes. Close your eyes. Think back to your childhood bedroom, wherever that may have been, the many wherevers that may have been. What objects can you see most clearly? What stories do you tell yourself about who you are through them? What objects can you see most clearly? What stories do you tell yourself about who you are through them? All right, you can open your eyes. Now that we've all got our own lenses focused, here is my childhood bedroom, which I was privileged enough to have preserved just like this for a majority of my adult life. It's like a 15-year-old scrapbook was allowed to explode onto the walls. It represents a smattering of things that at the time I thought were deeply cool, like Taylor Lautner from Twilight, Ray-Ban's Never Hide ad campaigns, band posters, ticket stubs from concerts, photos of my friends running through a field in Ohio. I'm from Ohio. These objects were the meaning-making tools of my young brain, and were as insignificant to someone else as they were precious to me. I took the work of decorating my room seriously, moving photos around, ripping doodles out from my geometry notebook. I even made little garlands out of pipe cleaners and paper to frame the photo arch of my high school friend group. It was my first creative practice, and in all honesty, I thought I did a pretty good job. And I'm, of course, not unique, right, in covering my bedroom walls this way. You could say that any teenager with the means and freedom to do so has the impulse to do this, to curate a slice of land for themselves that is a reflection of the aspirations and deep well of emotions hiding in their hormonal bodies. These are images from photographer Adrian Salinger's 1995 In My Room series, where Salinger collected images of 43 teenagers' bedrooms and accompanied them with interviews. Rania Mattar's 2012 series, A Girl and Her Room, similarly captures the bedrooms of teenagers and makes the case that teenage girls, ooh, look at that teenage girls have a particular relationship to their rooms as they learn in their bedrooms how to explore and protect themselves from the world around them. But to me, in my young mind, my bedroom was special. No one else I knew had a room that looked like mine, and therefore, in the story I told my young mind about myself, I was really onto something. I was a curator. I'll also say that this story had a healthy dose of encouragement from inside the house in the form of my dad, Ralph Curry, who was and still is a master class in pouring into a creative practice with tunnel-like vision. He's a cellist in the Cleveland Orchestra and has been honing his craft since he was in middle school. He's without a doubt my #1 inspiration for how to live a creative life, and his studio sat directly below my bedroom. And every morning of my childhood, and every evening as I did my homework and scotch taped more paper onto my bedroom walls, and I would study to the sounds of him practicing. These are some photos I took of him and his studio on a recent trip home playing cello for the family. Sheet music strewn about and a big smile on his face. I used to think of our 2 rooms stacked on top of each other as mirror images of each other, each operating as safe harbors for tinkering and creating on our own terms. Now, with some distance from my days of girlhood curation, I see that relationship between our rooms and between us as father and daughter more as a common story we tell ourselves about who we are. We share a desire to make our worlds bend to our creative output and absorb as much of our creative energy as possible, using the tools that make us feel most understood. After college, my parents very reasonably asked me to deinstall my bedroom exhibition from my walls, and I packed most of it away, storing it instead in manila folders and bins under my bed. Sifting through it all this summer, along with all the other arts and crafts that parents have a tendency to hold on to way longer than they need to, I embraced the full extent to which, as a curator, I'm still that 15-year-old scrapbooker, just with a more sophisticated stage, thank you, Rebel Museum, more sophisticated story to tell, and now budget, thanks to the DC taxpayer. And now that's the story I tell myself of how I became interested in curation as a creative practice. But there's a second, equally important story I tell myself from graduate school, one that opened the door for me to think about photography and curation in new ways, as well as the importance of public art and public humanities work in how I like to create. Before I do that, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes again. If you'd indulge me, please think about where your family's photos are kept. Do they exist? Are they kept in albums? Are they kept in shoeboxes? In frames? On mantles? How does where these images live impact your relationship to your family's history? How does where these images live impact your relationship to your family's history? All right, you can open your eyes again. So my story takes place during one of my first visits to a special collections archive and captures the feelings of uneasiness that I experienced while beginning my doctoral research on family photography. As some of you in this room might be able to relate to, doing archival research often requires long hours in a basement or in a dimly lit, silent room surrounded by dusty folders, in well-kept folders, I'll say. I was in my second year of my American Culture PhD program and had received some research funds to travel to the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnography, a museum and archive at Harvard University with a long history of doing a bad job with the histories and artifacts of people of color, particularly Native American and Black histories. I was visiting to work with the archival papers of Caroline Bondet, who in 1926 was the first Black woman to study anthropology at Harvard, and who had conducted research on 365 Black families of social note with a history of white and Native racial mixture. In my opinion, that's pretty much all Black families in America, but by 2023 standards, Day's research agenda would be considered questionable at best, right? Day collected hair samples, she collected blood samples, and submitted her friends and family to body measurement by a caliper, including her friends W.E.B. Du Bois and Walter White, who at the time was the head of the NAACP. So you can imagine these two very prominent leaders in the Black community submitting themselves to blood samples, hair samples, getting measured, getting their head measured. Less interested in these materials, what I came for were the photographs. As part of her research on these families, Day wrote to her female friends and acquaintances and solicited family photographs. And in return, her friends turned research subjects would write back with family histories and photographs enclosed. And this is what my dissertation research at the time was working to understand: how Black women and mothers curate images of interracial kinship, and how these representations inform how mixed-race families in America are situated within Black politics and culture over the last century. Since I'm the daughter of a white mother and Black father, this research is of course personal to me in some ways and is fueled by a desire to see better and more complex narratives of Black motherhood and womanhood in the context of interracial family histories, which for the most part of the last several centuries has been very dominated by narratives of white motherhood. The archive contained multitudes. Thousands of formal and informal images, pairs of mothers and daughters, rows of children neatly lined up in descending height order, cars, porches, gardens proudly on display. As I worked through the boxes of images and all the life contained in them, however, I grew extremely wary of the layers of gatekeeping and privilege that came with my being there. I toggled my own lens and refracted Caroline Bondet's story through my own. A prestigious university PhD student, generously funded and granted access to an Ivy League museum basement, where permissions were granted 2 months prior to my visit. I thought about the meticulous and unsung labor of archivists and special collections librarians who are our superheroes, whose work I would be in conversation with, but only via single-authored, peer-reviewed articles or dissertation chapters or academic books. To publish these materials, I would need to purchase the rights to the image from the museum, rather than ask permission of the families photographed themselves. When I left the archive, the boxes of images would go back into storage, rather than back onto the mantle of some family's living room and lovingly tucked back into coffee table books. It all felt off to me. Here, in contrast, is where the Curry family photographs are kept. In an old suitcase at my Uncle Bill's house, our family's diligent, though somewhat unreliable narrator. I'm assuming many of you, in your moments of reflection, pictured something similar to this, rather than a special collections library. After this experience in the archive, my approach to my own research fundamentally changed. On a very pragmatic level, I started pursuing opportunities that would put me in contact with people who were interested in interacting with family archives in ways that were immediately public and communal, spaces like galleries and museums. With funding from this great institution in Detroit called the Carr Center for Black Visual and Performing Arts, I connected with a group of very early career Black artists and curators. We were all in our early 20s, and we started creating work together. The Carr Center had recently come into this beautiful new gallery space in the historic Cass corridor of Detroit. And for folks who don't know Detroit and the Cass corridor, it's very similar to the rapid gentrification that somewhere like Shaw or U Street has experienced in the last decade. Cass has that similar blueprint. The new gallery space was meant to be a space for Detroit-based Black artists to come and feel at home, to showcase their work, to see local Black arts and culture thriving. To coincide with this gallery opening, the Carr Center's artist in residence was Carrie Mae Weems, whose art you may be familiar with via her Kitchen Table series, or From Here I Saw What Happened and I Cried, a series reinterpreting archival images of enslaved peoples, a handful of which were coincidentally owned by the Peabody Museum that I had just been at feeling icky at. Carrie Mae Weems is also just my personal hero. She's just someone who drives me, and so it was an incredible experience working alongside her. And together we produced 2 exhibitions, one called The Spirit That Resides in Havana, Cuba, and the other called Beyond Space in Detroit. And under Carrie's mentorship, I was able to turn one of my dissertation chapters into an installation and catalog essay for the opening of the new gallery space. And working with Carrie, I focused this installation on one woman, Mildred Loving, the mother of the Loving family at the center of the Loving v. Virginia Supreme Court case that overturned interracial marriage bans. I was interested in what new stories we could tell about this historic case and Mildred Loving, in particular, through forgotten images of the family taken by life photographer Gray Valet that resurfaced on the 50th anniversary of the court ruling. In designing the installation, I recalled my uneasiness in the archive and wanted to invite visitors to feel like they could interact with the historical materials in a way that honored them as family photographs, rather than archival images or gallery art for sale. In front of the wall, I placed a pair of lounge chairs and a coffee table that had the effect of creating a living room within the gallery, where one might encounter and read something like a Life magazine. I also wanted to create a space for people to sit while in a gallery space. Those are few and far between. We need to fix that. And fast forwarding to the present, in my short time as curator of the DC Arts Commission's I Street Gallery, I started about a year ago now, I've been able to immediately act on this desire to bring family archives into the public eye. With our summer exhibition in partnership with the family of George Clinton, AKA the legendary frontman and funk master of Parliament Funkadelic. Over the course of the spring, I worked with Clinton's grandson, Xavier Croft, who at the tender age of 24 is the family historian and keeper of the archive. As you can see, the archive once again contained multitudes, even though it was wheeled into our offices in a couple roller suitcases and stored in Xavier's bedroom underneath his bed. The exhibition we were able to curate, A Toast to the Boogie, Art in the Name of Funkadelic, celebrated the family's archive of photographs and memorabilia alongside original artworks by 20 artists exploring DC's unique relationship to funk music, psychedelic rock, and the cultural movements they inspire. The show was successful, in my opinion, because Xavier and I shared a common set of lenses about how family stories have the capacity to extend beyond the family and onto the culture as a whole. We also shared a commitment to empowering families to organize and display their family archives on their own terms, which I think in this instance came through in our choice to host the show in DC, where many P-Funk band members and extended family live. So many of the P-Funk family and band members were at the show looking at their family images. So that is the story I tell myself about how I feel compelled to make family archives public. Now, finally, for one last moment of reflection, I want to end with why I've become increasingly compelled to explore the relationship between family heirlooms and fine art. Okay, one more time, please close your eyes. Think of an object that is considered an heirloom in your family. but to another person would hold little to no material value. What does this object mean to you? What is beautiful or unique about this object? What is beautiful or unique about this object? All right. I want to sit in these moments of silence for much longer on this gray day, but we have a hard out. So here's a family heirloom I'd like to bring up for discussion, which I was introduced to through my work with Taya Miles, who's a public historian and professor at Harvard University and my mentor and collaborator of about a decade now. As I was finishing up grad school in 2021, Taya was completing the research and writing towards the book you see here, All That She Carried, which traces the history of a mid-19th century embroidered cloth sack, lovingly nicknamed Ashley's sack. The story embroidered onto the sack recounts the sale of an enslaved 9-year-old girl named Ashley and the parting gift of the sack by her mother, Rose. As the sack reads, "My great-grandmother, Rose, mother of Ashley, gave her this sack when she was sold at age 9 in South Carolina. It held a tattered dress, 3 handfuls of pecans, a braid of Rose's hair. Told her it be filled with my love always. She never saw her again. Ashley is my grandmother, Ruth Middleton, 1921. It's a really powerful story. And given the very little direct archival evidence tied to the story and the story of most enslaved women, it was clear to Taya from the beginning that she was committed to bringing Rose, Ashley, and Ruth to life from as many different angles as possible, using literature, art, textile histories, all to triangulate their experience among many other experiences. This became true as well of the glossy image section, usually saved in the history books for supportive documentary images. Given my curatorial experience with telling Black women's family histories, Taya brought me on to co-curate a visual essay for the book titled Carrying Capacity that brings Ashley's sack into conversation with work of contemporary art by mostly Black women artists. Something that was important to Taya and me was that we honor Ashley's sack as equal parts textile, poem, family heirloom, and work of art. So four meanings: textile, poem, family heirloom, work of art. We wanted to signal to readers that there has always been an abundance of creativity in the daily acts of survival of Black women's lives. Black artists, similarly, are gifted refractors of historical and contemporary traumas. They often make new resources out of old materials. We're looking at some here. They turn old stories the nation has told itself about race and our humanity into new ways of seeing and being. Like the Letitia Huckabee work here. I don't know if you all can see that. It's the tiny one there. This work depicting a little girl holding a sign saying enough on a cotton picking sack. Black artists frequently invoke faith in the divine or an ancestor, like in Sanford Bigger's sculpture Selah, or Rosie Lee Tompkins' quilt quoting Bible passages. They also urge us to look inward, to the senses and capacities we hold in our bodies. Like Sonia Clark's skein of black hair turned into yarn. This is black hair that she turned into knitting yarn. Through grappling with artworks and their meanings, we put tools in our human toolbox. We give ourselves new instruments for looking and feeling. What happens to our sense of home crafts and folk art, for example, when we think about heirlooms like Ashley's sack as both historical artifact and beautiful work of embroidery, as a work of art worthy of display in museums like it lives today? I've noticed lately, or perhaps my lens has become particularly attuned to an increase in artists exploring this relationship between family heirlooms and family photography and fine art. Lost my place. In the summer of 2022, for Juneteenth and Father's Day, for example, the New York Times invited Taya and I to respond to the works of 10 Black photographers tasked with capturing the role of family heirlooms in their lives. In interviews with artists, it was clear to them that the task of capturing what a family heirloom meant to them was a challenge because the word invoked experiences of wealth and inheritance that many of the photographers just didn't identify with. I'm imagining in your minds, you might have had that same struggle. Oh, I don't have a beautiful ring to pass down. Oh, I don't have that giant china set that my mom has passed down, right? These photographers felt the same way. The resulting digital exhibition showed a reimagined definition of heirlooms that created lots of room for the joyful intimacies of ordinary objects, like bangles and game pieces and dresses, recipe books, hair pomade. Photographing these objects and elevating them to the status of heirloom, to me, was a simple and perfect intervention. It affirmed for me that I should celebrate and cherish my childhood bedroom wall collage. It reminded me that my Uncle Bill's suitcase of Curry family photographs was both archive and treasure, both a reflection of our family and a refraction of his mind's own creation. I'm hoping this morning that reflecting on your own family archive, even if only for a couple uncomfortable moments, you're reminded of how much power there is in letting your hands make a mark on it. I think it would be a missed opportunity if I didn't carve out a little time at the end to talk about and encourage you all to ask questions in Q&A about doing this kind of community collections and curation work in a gallery controlled by the DC government. Just a fun fact, did you know that 5% of sales tax in DC goes directly into the DC Arts Commission's budget? That's why the art is free in this city. Not just at the federal level, right? At the local level, the arts are funded. Yeah. Because of this fact, it's my opinion that the I Street Gallery should be narrowly concerned with exhibiting work that strives to be a reflection, rather than a refraction, of the city's contemporary art landscape. And in a utopian world, our government structures generally should be striving to reflect the needs of its constituents rather than promote their own agendas. In this way, the curation and selection of work that I do should be as democratic as possible. All of our shows, in fact, are purposely either juried exhibitions or curated by independent curators funded by grant lines that are juried. The show that we're opening tonight, please come, in celebration of Art All Night, DC Art Now 2024, is a great example of this model in action. DC Art Now is an annual exhibition of selected work by finalists for this year's Art Bank program, which, if you don't know, is this grant line that allows the DC government to buy artwork for its permanent art collection. Many of you might not know that the DC government has a permanent art collection. It also becomes a loan program that circulates art across the city and its government buildings. For this exhibition, we had 18 jurors from across the DMV's arts ecosystem who helped select artworks for finalist review. The range of works on display, I think, does an impressive job of reflecting DC in a way that doesn't just bring beautiful work onto the walls of government buildings, but that allows government workers and building visitors to feel seen in new and old ways. It's also a 10-minute walk from here, and it's open to the public even right now, so if you wanted to take a field trip right after, you could. I know it's Art All Night, and many of you are going to be running around the city like chickens, just trying to take it all in. But if you'd like to stop by, I'd love to see you all there. And that is all I have to say to you today. Thank you so, so much.
I got one question for you, because we got a hard out. I can't open the floor for Q&A, I'm sorry, but I am going to ask one question. a lot of the work of reflection that you just sort of talked about, and I know because we have a friendship, some of the work of reflection of your own personal life, sort of that reflection orients you towards pain and past hurt. Can you just talk about sort of the next thing to do?
After the pain?
After you felt that, like what is it, what do you do with that pain? How do you use that? How do you park that? What do you do? Because I know a lot of people will, the intent is to reflect, the intent is to do that work, and then they hit that pain wall, and it's like, nah, I'm out. I don't want to relive that, right?
Yeah, I'm actually really sort of intrigued that you heard so much pain in the reflection.
I didn't hear that much pain. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I think in all of the examples that I showed, there's the other side of it, right? There's like the hope of ingenuity and resourcefulness that comes with getting through to the other side. I love the idea that we all just make sense of ourselves through the hurdles as much as we make sense of ourselves through the sun, right? Like today, we're all gathered here today in the gray and gloom of a week that we all experienced together. The gray and gloom of this week was palpable. But we're also all gathered here today listening to me, listening to yourselves inside. And I think we can hold those two things in tension always. There's no like other side. It's always both and. Is that good? Okay. Thank you,
Great.
everyone.
Yeah, no. Folks, we're doing great on time, which I wasn't sure if that was going to be the case. So we move. Let's do it. If you've been here before, you know that at the end of every event, I just saw so many people smile. I think people were anxious that we weren't going to have time to do this. There's a lot of smiles in the house. You know that at the end of every event, I like to sort of seal the moment with a moment of collective silence. A lot of reasons why we do this. Because I said so and I have the microphone is primarily one of them. But also I believe in the power of collective silence. I think we move a lot far too quickly as a society, and we move on far too quickly from things, especially a talk like today. I want to just take this time to do some more reflecting on whatever you need to reflect on. A talk like this, and a lot of the conversations I have with Michelle and sort of our group of friends, always, especially in this season, sort of pulls my attention to the fact that we're also living in an increasingly digitized world. And I'm not really here to say whether that's good or bad. I don't know. I don't care. But I will say that there is a value in holding things. There's a value in holding photos. There's a value in printing. Photographers, raise your hand if you're a photographer in the room. And of all of you, go home this weekend and print out one of your photos for no other reason than just to do it. Really, truthfully. I think also in a season and time where there are a lot of people around the world being displaced, daily, hourly, by the minute. When they are displaced, they are often displaced with things that are valuable to them. And those things are their identity, they are their stories, they are their histories, they are their existence. And I think that is a beautifully heartbreaking, wonderful thing for us to also reflect on. One of the sadistic things about stability is the more stable we are in our being, in our security, in ourselves, on our day-to-day, the less intentionally we have to live. We can forget about intention. We forget to value the things that we love. We forget to look for those heirlooms because we don't have to, because we assume they'll always be there. But there's a lot of people in this world who don't have that assumption, who know that they will not always be there. So if you need something to reflect on that. I don't mean to ask you to bear the burdens of the world, but yeah, maybe sometimes we need to bear the burdens of the world for a minute, because it's easy to get desensitized to that. I'll stop talking. We're gonna do 2 minutes, because we're doing, Kaylee says 3, we're gonna do 3, 5, anybody? We'll do 2 minutes of collective silence, breathe together, feel the room, do what you gotta do, starting now. Let's come out of it slowly. I'm going to have everybody take one deep, big breath in and let it out. One more. And out. One more. And out. There's value in breathing together. That's always really fun. When I took this role as host in 2021, I told myself that I would hold it and steward it and do my best for 2 years. And then after that 2 years, at the beginning of every year, I would sit down and reflect on whether I still needed to be the person to hold the role. And at the beginning of this year, I did that very thing. And in that reflection, over the course of probably a month, I kind of just felt like it was time to let it go. The host position is not appointed, it's not voted on. It's something that is simply tapped and passed. Raquel, our previous host, carried us through a challenging 2020 year that, quite frankly, took everything out of her to keep this thing alive while it wasn't meeting in person. And after that year, she asked me if I would be down to sort of carry the baton. And I, after a lot of conversation with a lot of people, said yes. But it's not something that I think I need to be doing for 5, 7. This role should evolve with this community. And I think I had a role to play for the time that I had it, but January of this year I sort of decided and sort of talked to some wise counsel friends and my wife and our core team and said, hey, I think it's time for me to step down. So this is sort of me announcing that this will be my last year as host of Creative Mornings DC. October, November, I will get to sort of finish out the time chilling on this stage. And hanging out with all of you. I'm not dying. I'm also not moving. I'm still around. I just won't be on stage holding a microphone in my hand. But I wanted to give enough time for 2 things to happen. I wanted to give enough time for people who aren't in the room, people who are in the room, to just know that this transition is happening, because it's a move that's happening for all of us. So I wanted us to share that. I didn't want it to be jarring. I know people might have questions. We have 2 months to answer those questions. But I also wanted a time for everyone to be reintroduced to the person who will be taking the helm after I put the microphone down. And right after I decided, it was like, okay, cool, that's the next step, is who, just like Raquel looked at me and said, hey, I think you're the person. Who is the person? And this was tricky. There's a world where part of me believes that everything should be done in consensus. But I also know that world is not very efficient, and things need to move a little bit more efficiently sometimes. So as much as I would have loved to open the floor for nomination, have everybody vote for who that just was never going to happen. Again, we're volunteers. But I do have, I do love that we have a team of people who are just watching and seeing who's in the room, who's regularly in the room, who's stepping up in the room, who is smiling and present and warm and welcoming. And I've also been doing that for the last year, just watching the room and saying, like, I'm not going to do this forever, so who's going to do it next? And after sort of deciding that I was not going to be the one, I asked someone who has become a fast friend, who I really didn't know very well. But I say all the time that a community of fidelity is a community that just shows up fundamentally. I don't believe that's the start of intimacy, is fidelity. That's the start of depth, is fidelity. So I looked around and said, first of all, who's always here? Who always shows up? Who's always present? Who's always asking? Who's always willing? And this person's name and face came to mind. Also, I went through like all our photos, because we have photography, and I'm like, whose faces are literally in all these photos? For the last 7 years. And I asked Kaylee if she would be down to take the role of host next. And her first response was no. And that's how I knew that she was right. She said no, and I asked her to think about it, and she thought about it. And The more that she thought about it, she had questions, and I answered those questions as best that I could. I know that the next season of Creative Mornings for DC is going to require a different type of leader than I am, and I really do feel confident that she is that type of leader. She's been on our core team now for the last 4 months, 4 or 5 months, just learning with us and hanging with us, and I see people pointing to phones. So I just wanted to quickly just announce and introduce Kaylee Bryant Greenwell over here, who will be our next host for Creative Mornings DC. It is such a sweet, there's actually nothing bitter about this. This is such a sweet transition. It's going to be a really good time. Kaylee is a wonderful, wonderful human, lover of art, lover of creativity, lover of community. She does this for a living also, like this is her job to create creative community at the Aspen Institute. And I'm also excited to announce that you guys will be able to hear more about her because she's our speaker for next month. Kaylee will be holding down the stage at DuPont Underground on October 18th. Also, look how far we've come, guys. This is a graphic for next month. Wow. October 18th at DuPont Underground, same time, doors open at 8:30, program starts at 9. I hope to see you all there, and then our November event will be November 20-something. I also have that 22nd, thank you, November 22nd at the Luce Auditorium at the American Art Museum. And on that event, you'll get to hear me talk and kind of say some words. So yeah, that's the rest of our year. Please ask any questions that you have of myself, of Kaylee, of our core team. Go and be well and keep reflecting. All of you got this sticker when you walked in the door. If you did not, please go get it. This is your access to the museum. So if you have time, actually, even if you don't have time, call your boss and say I'm sick. Go check out the new exhibition. Please do not take your coffees into that space because someone will tackle you. It might be me. But yes, so go look at the art. DC Art Now tonight, down the street on I Street. Questions here. Love you all. Love this space. Have a great weekend.